We ask the question, what is needed in the world?
Dobrodošli u Recite Al Jazeeri. Naš gost je gospodin Serge Bramertz, glavni tužitelj Međunarodnog kaznenog suda za bivšu Jugoslaviju. Na ovu je poziciju došao u novembru 2007. godine, a prošle godine Vijeće sigurnosti Ujedinjenih naroda njegov je mandat produžilo do 31. decembra 2014. kada se očekuje da bi Haški tribunal trebao okončati svoj rad. Mr. Bramertz, very welcome to our show, Talk to Al Jazeera.
Good afternoon.
From the beginning, I would like to ask you, how do you, as a human being, feel regarding the extent and nature of crimes committed in the former Yugoslavia?
You know, I was confronted with, like many people in the early 90s, I was a junior prosecutor in Belgium when I saw the war starting. And of course, I was very much shocked, like everybody, to see that this was possible in the center of Europe. Of course, at that time, I would never have imagined that one day I would be the chief prosecutor of the tribunal dealing with those issues. So, of course, it has a strong impact on how you see things.
How would you evaluate the work of the tribunal since you have been appointed the head of this institution? What has been done and what should have but hasn't been done?
You know, there's of course continuity between the different prosecutors from day one until today. I think that all prosecutors have really tried as much as they can to make sure that justice can prevail and that cases can move forward. What has been the most important challenge for myself since I'm in this post-January 2008 was of course the arrest of the remaining fugitives. I remember very well when I started in 2008, people were quite pessimistic about the chances of having Mladic and Karadzic one day arrested. And I remember that in all my meetings here in Sarajevo, every time I met with victims' organizations in general and the Mothers of Srebrenica in particular, this was always their number one request. And I think that as a tribunal and as an office of the prosecutor, together with my team, we are of course very satisfied that finally, late, hopefully not too late, the remaining fugitives have been arrested. Now, what are the remaining challenges? Of course, we have to make sure that we have the resources to make sure that those trials, that the Karadzic trial can be finalized, like a number of other trials. And of course, we are looking forward to have the Mladic trial starting next week.
Regarding the ongoing trials you are conducting, Ratko Mladic trial, yes, is planned to start on May of 16. How many witnesses will the tribunal call and how long do you expect this trial to last?
It's of course a very complex case because this case is covering the ethnic cleansing in a number of municipalities. We speak about three years of siege of Sarajevo. We speak about the genocide in Srebrenica and about the hostage taking of Blue Helmets. So we speak about more than 400 witnesses, but only a limited number will be in court. For many, we will only rely on their written statements.
You suggested earlier that Karadzic and Mladic trials could be joined. Has the tribunal entirely discarded this idea?
Yeah, you know, we have always said that the only good solution or the best solution would have been to have both together before the judges, one being the alleged architect of the crimes committed, the other one being the head of the military, being in charge of implementing the policy of ethnic cleansing. We know very well that this was not possible because there are 2 years between the arrests of the two accused. It was technically not feasible anymore to put those cases together, and there is no plan at all to do this today.
But how would you describe the course to trial against Radovan Karadzic so far?
You know, we just finished the prosecution case. As you know, the trials have always two important phases. One is the prosecution case, presentation of evidence. The other one is the defense case. So we just finished the prosecution case, which was used by my office to introduce into evidence a number of statements. We speak also here about more than 400 statements which entered into the proceedings. We speak about more than 5,000 elements of evidence which have been submitted to the judges. So we are satisfied that we stayed within the time limit given to us by the tribunal. But of course, it's too early to have any conclusion. It's now the defense phase starting, and it's only after that the judges will decide about a sentence.
Do you expect the presenting the evidence could drag on, like in Milosevic's case?
You know, the Milosevic case, of course, it was very unfortunate that the case could not be finished. And of course, this was the case which covered several wars. In relation to Karadzic and Mladic, the indictments are more focused, or only focused on the war and the crimes committed in Bosnia. But you know, it's of course very, very difficult to find a balance between, on one hand, representing in a trial the importance and the magnitude and the numbers of crimes committed, and on the other hand, trying to keep a trial manageable. That's a very difficult compromise, and this is really what I always say is the most frustrating part of our job. On the one hand, very positive, we can really bring justice to victims in a number of important cases, but we always have to do selections. You know, we cannot prosecute all incidents, so we have to choose between grave and gravest crimes. There were for the individual victims. Of course, it doesn't make really a difference, and in a perfect world, we would of course like to prosecute all crimes to make sure that all victims see their case prosecuted.
And what do you think about Karadzic's defense strategy?
You know, Karadzic has decided to represent himself. He has, as you know, used a lot of time in the courtroom for cross-examinations. It's really up to him to determine his defense strategy, and we are looking forward to the start of the defense case.
What is your opinion on Ante Gotovina and Mladen Markać's appeal and their arguments for their sentences to be repealed or reduced?
You know, it's probably not appropriate for me to comment on ongoing cases. The appeals hearing will take place next week. My office will present its argument why we think that the first instance judgment has to be confirmed, but it's up to the judges to decide at the end of the day.
You used to accuse the government of the Republic of Croatia for the lack of cooperation, for not delivering the artillery diaries from Operation Storm. Has the situation regarding the issue changed?
It is indeed correct that in the past there have been sometimes difficult discussions with members of the Croatian government in relation to those documents. I was last week in Croatia and I met with members of the new government. But of course, those were discussions which were ongoing prior to the end of the Gotovina trial. I would say that currently, with the trial being over and the appeals proceedings being underway, that there is of course less interaction with Croatian authorities in relation to those documents.
Generally, how would you describe your cooperation with the governments in the region? What kind of problems you are facing?
Very difficult to answer this question in 2 or 3 sentences, because as you know, in the early days when I speak with my predecessors, they of course experienced much bigger difficulties in the early days than I experience today. As you know, the first years of the existence of the tribunal, governments were not very supportive. It was difficult to have access to archives. It was difficult to have access to documents. It was difficult to have witness protection implemented. The biggest problem has always been the non-arrest of the fugitives, where, of course, with the arrest of the last fugitives, I think we have altogether achieved a major result. So I would say that cooperation today is of a different quality. With Serbia, of course, we are still asking them to seriously investigate those who were involved in helping the fugitives escaping for so long. In relation to Bosnia, we have also a number of ongoing cases where cooperation is fine, but where we see the challenge much more in the context today of the implementation of the national war crime strategy, much more than in cooperation with our office. And in relation to Croatia, of course, the focus of the cooperation today is in relation to the Hadžić trial, which of course it's of a totally different nature.
But on the other side, how would you describe cooperation between governments in this region? How would you describe the work of courts in our region to date and your cooperation with them?
I think regional cooperation is still a main challenge. We see that in relation to cooperation on organized crime cases, for example, that the legislative framework is much stronger than in relation to war crimes cases. So we think that the non-extradition of their own nationals between Serbia and Bosnia is still a problem. We look
about parallel processes.
Parallel investigations, and there, as you know, there is a protocol which has been negotiated between the prosecution offices of the two countries. We, of course, hope that there will very soon be the necessary political will to have this agreement signed too. So in relation to cooperation, there is still not a lot to be done.
Do you think that duration of certain trials is justified? For example, Vojislav Šešelj had been detained for 9 years now. What are the main reasons for such lengthy trials?
I think nobody can be satisfied that the trial takes 8 years, and I'm not trying to justify or to defend this. It is unfortunate. There are, of course, many reasons for that. Some of them, of course, being that since the beginning, Šešelj was entering a hunger strike because he wanted to represent himself. One can say that he has not necessarily done, or has been not very helpful in helping moving the proceedings moving forward. There have been a number of contempt investigations because Šešelj has published in a number of his books confidential information. So there have been a number of elements which are have contributed to those delays, but I agree with you, we should have mechanisms in place that avoid having trials ongoing for so many years.
And what is your opinion on the length of sentences? Is justice fully served? Also, some of those convicted were released after serving half of their sentences, thanks to the pardons by the countries they served the sentence in. How should the victims' families interpret decisions like this? Yeah, in relation to sentencing, it's of course in the hands of the judges and it's their responsibility, and it would not be appropriate for me to make comment in this regard. What we are doing as officer of the prosecutor is of course presenting all the evidence we have, and it's up to the judges to give weight to this evidence and to decide about the length of a sentence. You know that the tribunal has a number of agreements with a number of states for the execution, the implementation of the sentences. So countries are not serving their sentence in The Hague, but in a number of countries which have agreed to take convicted persons. It is not correct that people can be pardoned or can leave already after 50%, but it's indeed correct that under the national legislation of all those countries, after 2/3, somebody can be provisionally released, and this practice is indeed used and has been used in a number of cases. What do we think about it? Again, those are the rules, but of course I fully understand that for victims it's very difficult to accept that after 2/3, that after 10 years, 15 years, 18 years, those who have been involved in their suffering are released, can start almost a normal life, and that as victims they are still confronted with the problems of the past and with the loss of their loved ones. In the past, and sometime just now, Serbian officials often regarded the Hague Tribunal as a political. How do you perceive such views on the tribunal's credibility?
You know, everybody has the right to have his or her view on the tribunal. I'm now working in this institution for 4 years, and I can guarantee you that it's a very mature, a very professional, a very judicial institution with professionals coming from 65 countries. And I see it every day as a very independent, impartial institution, and therefore I do not think at all that this kind of criticism is justified.
And what is the significance and impact of the tribunal's decisions on reconciliation in the region? Do you feel that the tribunal has fulfilled its primary mission?
It's a difficult topic, and very often we have this kind of discussion, and sometimes we receive this other kind of criticism where people are saying, where people are telling us, you know, we have perhaps prosecuted a number of people, and in total we're at 161 indictments, but what about reconciliation? And I'm always very, very clear in saying that accountability, prosecuting those who bear the greatest responsibility, is a condition sine qua non. It's really a precondition to make sure that the reconciliation starts. I don't think that people can forgive, can accept, can move forward if there is no proper prosecution of those who are responsible. Of course, reconciliation means you need partners for reconciliation. We are doing one part, which is the prosecution. But what we see in the region, one of the problems is, of course, that a number of politicians are still not very supportive. There are still a number of politicians which are still using the nationalist feelings from the past to criticize the tribunal today and to somehow jeopardize the process of reconciliation. We really want to underline that the non-governmental organizations are playing a very, very important role. So we see that there is progress, but this progress is still slow. And of course it is very disappointing for us to see that a number of persons who are based on serious evidence convicted for war crimes, crimes against humanity or genocide, are still in their home communities very often seen as heroes. And this, I think, is a problem where the entire society has to work on and where politicians in the region have to be very responsible.
You have indicted 161 people so far, and the tribunal has convicted 64 people. How would you evaluate the efficiency of the tribunal, the number and length of sentences? Have justice been served?
You know, numbers is always a very relative issue. You know, we had a few months ago, there was a big conference in The Hague, and there was Madeleine Albright, the former Secretary of State from the US, speaking there. And she was in the Security Council when the tribunal had been created. And at this conference, it was a few days after Mladic's arrest, she said, when the decision had been taken in the Security Council, they had not really imagined that this tribunal would really be created one day. And sitting there, she said, she would never have expected that one day all the fugitives searched by the tribunal would be arrested one day. So it's always a question of perspective. I think that the achievements are there. 161 is, I think, a lot compared to other international tribunals. But of course, in comparison to the number of potential perpetrators, and we speak about thousands of perpetrators, is only a limited number. But it has never been the mandate of the tribunal to prosecute everybody. The mandate was really to make sure that those who bear the greatest responsibility are prosecuted in The Hague. And what we see today is that we have very competent and a motivated partner in the region, in Bosnia-Herzegovina, in Croatia and in Serbia, where an important number of prosecutors are at the national level continuing the work we are doing. And we think that this positive complementarity between, on one hand, the UN tribunal dealing with the most important cases, and at the national level having an important number of prosecutors dealing with the other cases, is the best way to have an integrated approach between the national level and the international level.
Very concretely, when do you expect the tribunal work to be completed, and do you really believe that national courts will be able to do the rest of the work they were entrusted with?
The Security Council in their last resolution has decided that we have to do everything possible to make sure that by 31st December 2014 all trials are over. I'm relatively confident that by then all the first instance trials will be over. Probably not all the appeals proceedings, but this remains to be seen. So I think we are somehow on track, and with the Mladic trial starting in May and the Hadžić trial starting in October, we are really getting closer to the end. Now, at the national level, it's far from being perfect, and it is clear that I don't want now to say I'm absolutely confident that everything will be fine. I think that there are a lot of challenges. I went today to visit the East Sarajevo District Court to see how things are going at a district level and a cantonal level, because in application of the national war crime strategy in this country, there will be a number of cases which will still remain with the state court, and an important number of cases have already and will be transferred to the jurisdictions of the entity levels. And it is very important that there is on one hand the necessary political support to make sure that the state court can continue doing their important work. I hear always political discussion almost questioning the existence of the state court. We think that the state court is a key player in making sure that the international war crime strategy, I want to integrate ourselves and our office in this strategy. But of course it's also very important that the courts at district and cantonal level have the necessary equipment, the necessary resources, and the necessary knowledge to move those kind of cases forward. And today I had the opportunity to visit a support office which has been put in place and financed by UNDP, which has supported the creation of those kind of offices in several places in Bosnia. And it's about the support for victims and witnesses.
And what's about with the courts in Serbia and Croatia?
You know, there are of course cases ongoing in Serbia and Croatia too. I think the European Union, the international community is following those cases more closely. But I think the main challenge will really be in Bosnia, simply because the majority of, or the largest number of crimes have been committed here. So the number of investigations still to be conducted is absolutely the highest in Bosnia. And of course the political situation and the structure of the country is not necessarily making things easier. So that's why I think that the main challenge for the years to come in relation to national war crimes proceedings will be in Bosnia-Herzegovina.
And on the end, have you been thinking about publishing, for example, a book like Mrs. Carla Del Ponte did? One day when you leave the office, will you reveal maybe more details about the tribunal's work?
Yeah, you know, I do not intend writing a book about my experiences. Perhaps one day about some legal questions or legal issues, but that's for sure nothing I'm thinking about. We are so busy with our ongoing cases that I'm really not spending a lot of time on those kind of projects for the time being.
Okay, we will see. Thank you very much for this interview.
Thank you.
Poštovani gledatelji, poštovani gledatelji, Serge Bramertz bio naš gost u Recite Al Jazeera, dakle, glavni tužitelj Međunarodnog krivičnog suda za bivšu Jugoslaviju. Gledajte Al Jazeera.
We ask the question, what is needed in the world?